Alright, so this video is going to begin talking about how you can get started with doing this type of learning and teaching in your classroom. You're going to be following along with me while I fill out my planning sheet when I'm planning out a unit. What you're going to need while you watch this video is going to be a blank planning sheet and a pencil. I'll show you what the planning sheet looks like. You should have it at your desk or your table. It's going to look something similar to this, and I'm going to go through and fill this out with you right now as we plan a specific unit. So let me show you what I want you to think about right now. So right now, think of a math unit that you have a few resources for. These can be worksheets, websites, activities. It's easier to get started with this kind of program if you have a unit that you've done a few times, or at least that you're familiar with, that you know you want your students to complete certain activities. It can be any unit, and a lot of this will be replaceable. So just start thinking about that right now while we go on and start filling out this planning sheet. For me, that unit's going to be multiplication. It's a 4th grade unit. I have a lot of resources for it. I've taught it for a few years now, so I know I have a lot of activities for the kids to begin with. So for the unit I'm going to do, we're going to write this down as multiplication. Now, I would be filling this out, most likely, on a computer to hand out copies to my students when I'm done with it, but this is really just a planning sheet for myself. I'll show you a finished product of this when I'm done with it, but as we go through this, you should be writing down your unit that you're going to do right up here. So the next question you ask yourself after you've got your title for your unit is going to be, what are the first 2 lessons in that unit? Well, see, for me, the way I've taught 4th grade multiplication is we start by multiplying by tens or multiples of 10, and then our next lesson goes to estimating multiplication. Now, I'm going to expect my students to master lesson 1 before they move on to lesson 2, and I think that's an important thing to notice here. Where you're going to want your students to master this whole first part of lesson 1 before they go on to lesson 2, which is going to be our next block on the bottom. I'm not going to let them continue unless they demonstrate mastery in our first lesson and in subsequent lessons before they even finish the unit as well. So as we fill this out, we're going to go ahead and put lesson 1 and lesson 2 in here. Now the next step is to fill out the Learn section. Now the idea of personalized learning has a lot to do with the voice and the choice that you give your students. So if you can find a way to give them a choice on how they're going to learn something, they're going to feel more empowered. So think about 2 ways that they can learn something. This can be direct instruction. This can be videos that you've made. This could be by reading the workbook. This can be by getting taught by another student. Even Google, having them Google something that you're trying to teach them will empower them to make a choice of which way they learn best. This hits learning styles. This hits learning preferences. So what we can do here, direct instruction is always a go-to option for us. I think it's the most thing we're familiar with. And what we've been doing and exploring in our classroom is doing videos as well. So I'm going to add that to mine. You can have a teacher mini lesson as one of your options, or a student who is going to learn the first lesson can come to you and get that type of direct instruction. You can also try a video on a teacher's website if you're able to do that. But again, you could fill in any 2 options here that you're comfortable with. By providing 2 options for the students, they now have a choice on how to learn something, and again, this is going to increase their motivation and their empowerment, right? And if you're fine with the students not watching a video, you can always direct them to the workbook, or Give them the option of learning from a more advanced learner in the classroom, where they can learn from student to student. You can write that on your lesson planner for this. After you do the learn, what you're going to have to do with your students now is make some choices for them to practice. What we're going to learn here is that, once again, we're going to give our students choices, and this can be a variety of activities. So I'm going to ask you a question now. What are the activities that you would like your students to complete to master the skill they're learning? For this unit, in this first lesson, they're learning multiplying by tens. So what are the options I have for them to practice this skill? They've had their either direct instruction, they've done their learn. What are the ways that they are going to practice now? Now, you have 4 options on your planning sheet, right? We're going to fill this out right now with some different ideas. Now, think about online activities that you've done in the past. Games, pencil and paper activities. There should be a lot of online things. And keep in mind, as you're filling out this practice, there should be a way for the students to record their activities and their scores, and to do some self-checking. We'll talk a little bit more about that later. But take a few minutes right now and jot down some ideas of what your students can do. You're going to fill this out on your planning sheet underneath the practice. And I'll show you what I've written down as well. You can see just a few of the options I have. I have the workbook pages. The WS here stands for worksheet. It's a worksheet that I've used in the past for this. There's also a game that the students can choose from called Spin a Number. And I've left an empty line right here for them. If there is a activity I can think of in the future, or the day of, I think students are going to be using, they would write this in on their own. I usually like to leave a blank line for them. And again, what they're going to be doing as they go through this, they're going to be choosing a learn, writing that date down. They're going to be choosing a practice, writing the date down as well. And our goal is to have them complete at least 2 of these. Depending on the child, depending on the day, we can fluctuate with that. We can choose to do all 3. They can just do 1. Sometimes I'll make assignments mandatory, and if that's the case, I'll usually put a star next to them and say, hey, look, guys, this is what we're going to be doing. This is going to be a mandatory assignment. I want to see everyone's performance on this and kind of compare and see how they did, especially if there's a nice challenge in there that I'd like them to get exposure to. Feel free to pause the video if you need to right now to just fill out your practice section of your worksheet to see if you can have some ideas for what the students can do. The next thing we want to talk about is assessing. Now, there's 2 types of assessing. One's going to be during their practices, and the other one's going to be at the very end of the specific lesson, right? So our lesson's on multiplying by tens. I want students to learn how to self-assess. It is going to be another type of skill that they can apply in every subject area. If they are a little bit more cognizant of their own learning and their own abilities, they're going to be able to remediate themselves or discover the different types of learning that they need to improve upon, right? So I want to show you 2 worksheets now, or a worksheet and an answer key. So this is just a typical worksheet that I've gotten from mathworksheetsforkids.com. It's a pretty good site for just basic rote problem solving. This is an estimating worksheet. This is actually a 5th grade worksheet in here, but you can see that there are a bunch of different problems. Directions are clearly listed there. Now, typically in traditional math, the kids will hand this in, the teacher will assess it, they'll call people back to the side table, say who needs to work on what, who needs the enrichment activity. That's something that students can do, and I would challenge you to see how far you can go with that. I would imagine that 1st graders can even do some form of self-assessing as well. Give them this answer key. Give them the key. You can see it's right here. They know what their answers are. They'll compare the 2 answers and see what they get, and then they can grade themselves. What they want to do is be able to, the purpose of self-assessment, it's going to make learners aware of how much they are learning and how much practice they still need. All right? Instead of a teacher telling a child, hey, you still need more work on this. Self-assessing allows a child to say, hey, I need more work on this. I'm not ready to show my mastery yet. I need to do another practice. We are putting the onus on the child to be able to dictate their pace of learning. Do they need more time? Let's give them more time. Have they mastered it already? Then let's let them move on. Let's make sure that they feel success and have some rewards as they are able to show their learning. So to go back to this planning sheet, right now you should have your title of your first lesson, your title of your unit, different learn options, some practice options. I just want to quickly go down here to the quick check. This is an exit ticket. You could do that in a few different ways, but really at the end to show, this is what a student is going to use to show that, hey, listen, I've mastered lesson 1, I'm ready to move on to lesson 2. This is what they use to do that. Now, primarily we use exit tickets in here, or we call them quick checks, whatever it might be. It's usually like 5 problems to just to show like, hey, look, I got this. But there are a few other things that you can do as well. So like I said, we do some quick checks or exit tickets. You can also have a conversation with the child, really. And they could count that as their quick check as long as you're dictating to them. Be like, listen, tell me or show me how you can multiply by tens. And if a student's able to articulate how to do that, I think you could count that. Think about a different type of assessment. Maybe students can make their own little mini videos. Anything to show what they know, that's the whole purpose. This is the third component of the personalized learning and competency-based math. They need to show that they've mastered a skill before they move on. All right, great. So what did we learn in this video? We learned that students can learn their information in a variety of different ways, and you could fill that out on their planning sheet, and you can come up with different ideas for them to learn the information. We learned that students can practice their skill in many different ways as well. Again, giving them options, voice and choice is huge. And finally, we learned that students can assess their own learning. And this might be the biggest shift, I think, with a lot of our traditional teaching practices, to make sure that we're letting students be more self-aware of how well they're doing instead of the teacher always guiding or dictating exactly what they do each and every single day. All right. If you have any more questions, fill out a Post-it note and place it on the parking lot. Otherwise, you can browse the other material in the room, and we can sit back, have a conversation, and we'll continue the presentation.